Police officers of Reddit, what is the scariest/creepiest thing to happen to you on the job? Ex-police officer here. This is the call that made me decide law enforcement wasn't for me. Conducted a no-knock search warrant on a drug house. First officer through the door secures the suspect closest to the door. Second officer secures the person second closest to the door, etc. I was the fourth officer in, and of course my suspect ran. I chase him down a hallway, he runs in a room and slams the door. I burst in right after, jump on top of him and get him secured. Before I cuffed him, he had his hand under the bed. I took him to the living room where the other suspects were being held, go back on the room and look under the bed, double-barrel sawed-off shotgun. My heart sank. I took a few photos for evidence, and collected the gun. Opened the barrels and found it was loaded with 2 slugs. I'm not sure he would have shot me had he gotten a hold of it, but it was enough to keep me up for 2 nights. I resigned 3 weeks later. I responded to a call for a subject shooting a shotgun in his house. When I arrive, his mom runs out screaming he's in his room. I have her wait by my car. Me and another officer enter, I am point man. We make our way to his bedroom and I turn the corner. He is sitting in a chair with a shotgun and looks at me. He casually greets me. I had dealt with him before from a past arrest. I attempt to talk to him and try to keep him calm. After about a minute he just says doesn't matter, thanks for trying though. And then shoots himself in the head. Did not survive. Still haunts me, but thanks to therapy and family I have handled as well as I could and I'm still a cop. My grandfather was a cop for 40+ years. He recently told me a story about getting a call from a neighbor saying they hadn't seen their neighbor, let's call him Bill, for a few days. My grandfather and another cop, John, show up at Bill's house. They knock and knock, but no answer. They check the doors and lo behold, one is unlocked. As they enter the house, my grandfather starts calling out, Mr. Bill, are you home? Is everything alright? This goes on while they search the house. Finally, Officer John goes down the steps to the basement. My grandfather hears him say, oh, Mr. Bill, there you are. Is everything alright? My grandfather goes down the steps to see Bill standing in his basement in his suit, complete with his hat, and one thing that was very, very off. My grandfather goes, John, I think Bill is dead. Dumbfounded, Officer John says, he's standing right there. And you don't see the rope around his neck? So, apparently Bill had hung himself with clothing line rope, tied it to a beam in his basement, and kicked away the stool he was standing on. Over the however many days it had been, the rope had stretched so much that Bill looked like he was standing in the dark basement. Out of all the stories I've heard so far, that was the saddest, funniest, because of Officer John's confusion, and darkest story I've heard my grandfather tell. I was working an off-duty job at a local theme park. It was an overnight, so the park was completely closed with no one around besides the occasional cleaner or painter. I usually just sit in my patrol car on my laptop, but when I get sleepy or need to stretch my legs I get out and go for a walk around the empty park. Let me tell you, amusement parks are really fucking creepy when they are empty at night, but I got used to it. On this particular night I was doing my normal walk, on my phone, probably on Twitter, when I look up and see a lady who appeared to be in her 60s, nonchalantly sitting at a table in one of the restaurants that was closed. Like just sitting there in the dark. This really confused the hell out of me, and she was not dressed like an employee. I tapped on the window and she turned her head and stared straight at me. I asked loudly what she was doing and she just turned her head back away from me and ignored me. I tried to open the door and it was locked. I called on the radio for park security to come over there and confirm if this lady was supposed to be there, while I walked back to my car to get the set of keys I kept in there. As I walk back to the front of the restaurant, 2 security guards are walking up at the same time as me. One of them peers in the window and asks somebody was in here? I look and the lady is no longer at the table. We get it open and search every crevice of this place and there was not a soul in there. You can say I was a little freaked out. We went back and checked the exterior cameras and nobody entered or exited. To this day this creeps me out and I can't explain it. Responded to a single vehicle crash out in the county. Found the car, it had left the road, crashed through a fence, rolled at least 3 times, came to rest right side up. The driver was mangled pretty bad, and actual paramedic says he's deceased. We secure scene, wait for the coroner. Coroner gets there, declares him dead, starts his investigation/documentation. About 20 minutes into it, we are all near the coroner van discussing the situation. We are about 20 feet from the victim car. The driver, who hasn't been removed yet, sits up, looks around, and starts the car. We all jumped about 5 feet straight into the air. Driver survived. Loads of investigation into how 2 trained pros declared a live man dead. A had a dude on heroin while trying to get something from his bedside table. He collapsed into it and choked to death with his head in the top drawer because he couldn't move. The best he could do is kind of hug it. So in the morning mum comes in and sees him, drags him off and puts him on the floor before calling oh. He is left exactly as he died. We arrived and he is on his back with all his limbs up like a dead bug, kind of like a crawling position but on his back. His face and neck was red but his throat had a white line where the drawer was resting to choke him. At a glance it looked like his throat was sliced because of the color difference. It wasn't scary so much, it just looked bizarre and isn't what you expect at 7 AM. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of the undertakers straightening out the rigor mortis joints. This older lady calls because her husband went outside to cut wood and didn't come back for lunch. He was recently diagnosed with a terminal illness. Anyway, we end up locating him in his barn hanging by the neck from a rafter. The other deputy had been on the job a while and seen most all. I on the other hand was new and hadn't seen shit. He'd been hanging a while because his neck was stretched out and his feet and ankles were filled with blood. He tells me to grab his thighs while he cuts the rope. Once the rope was cut the old guy flopped over my shoulder which forced all the air out of him through his throat and voice box. I can't really describe it but it was like the loudest and longest moan I'd ever heard. I screamed and dropped him. I felt bad for both. Not a cop, but a former EMT. I worked night shift, and this was either the night before or night of Halloween. We get a call to BFE for generalized pain, which is a giant red flag for us because that could range from I hurt my finger to I got shot and I'm dying but I don't want the cops to come. Now, since this is night shift, we get this call about 3 AM. So we get there, and it's a creepy old lady who get us to go into the house from the garage. Why? Because she has a TV blocking the front door out of fear of zombies or something showing up to rob her. Weird, right? Well, this garage was pitch black. We asked her to turn on the light and she wouldn't do it because squirrels chewed up the wires. So my partner and I kind of gave a weird look to each other but didn't think much of it, since we thought it was some Halloween thing. We go inside, and there's a single mattress on the floor. No other furniture besides the TV blocking the front door. The patient is the crazy lady's daughter. She's got chronic pain so it's NBD. So, we get her to the truck and something seems off with the crazy lady. So I automatically close the door to the truck, leaving the medic and patient in there, since he's much bigger than me and can handle himself and a patient already strapped to the stretcher. So I'm outside the truck and crazy old lady is standing there with her arm in a sling that she had just put on. I asked her to leave so I could go to the hospital. She tries to hand me a Diet Coke for her daughter and I refuse. This sets her off. She throws the Coke and runs off towards the house, but only a few feet before she turns back around and starts coming at me. I see something in her hand. She had pulled a knife out. My paramedic then opens the door to tell me he's ready to go and it startles the lady enough for me to be like Ike Lego and off we go to the hospital. I went home and cried. That was the first time I was almost killed on duty. And it was 3 AM at Halloween. My uncle was a cop in LA. He was attending a road traffic accident where a car had been racing round a corner too quickly, gone off the road and gotten stuck between some cement blocks. The car was completely vertical, the driver facing down to the ground and the trunk facing the sky. The guy was relatively coherent, but he trapped in the car because the front of the car was crunched and his legs were stuck. The car set on fire before they could get him out and he was basically burned alive. When they got the car out, all that was left was bones, apart from his fleshy legs that were preserved in the footwell. Not a police officer, but still a creepy story. I'm an EMT and we got a call from a guy whose father is on the floor and is unconscious. We didn't get much information, but OFC rode to the location. After arriving, we immediately saw that the place was a mess. Windowless thick walls, tons of dirt, and the smell was horrible. It was about 5 p.m. but no electricity in the house, and without windows the only light was from the door hole because the door was more like a hole in the wall barricaded with crappy furnitures. We got in with the equipment and saw the guy on the floor with about 6 people near him. We immediately started CPR, but the guy passed away. As we stopped and looked up to tell them the bad news, 4 men grabbed knives out of their pockets and told us that we won't go anywhere until we save him. We were scared shitless. There were only 3 of us and we were in no position to call backup. We had no choice and started CPR again, but OFC for nothing. After about 3 minutes of it, I got my head up and told them that we got the life signs back, but if they want him to live we need to get him in the car and drive him to the hospital. They reluctantly let us put the dead body in the car and we got away. We contacted the dispatch about what happened and what to do with the body, but that's another story. Sorry for my English and thanks for reading. One that just recently happened to me that was pretty creepy. I had an assist with rescue call. Dispatch said the caller came home from the store and found her sister unconscious in her bed. When we got there, you could clearly tell that her sister was deceased. What was creepy is that since rescue came to the house first, they really didn't take a look around until we got there. There were obvious signs of a burglary to the home. Broken window in the back room with the broken glass on the inside of the home. It also looked like she may have been strangled. Rescue took her since she still showed signs of life, but they said it had to have happened within the last hour of them arriving. I felt so bad for her sister that found her. I asked this question to the resource officer assigned to my school. So not my story. She was a newish cop in our city, 3 months in if I remember right. She got called into a domestic disturbance of loud banging in her apartment building. She goes into the building and can hear the banging. She goes down the hallway to see a man swinging an axe at a door. He is doing it slowly and weakly, so she assumed he's on some drugs or drunk. She draws her taser and tells the man to lower the axe and get on the ground. He looks and hauls ass, sprinting right at axe ready. She tases him and he immediately stops and falls face first into the floor, and then proceeded to piss himself. Husband's story: he's a constable in the UK. It's week on duty after training and his first back shift, so due home around 2 a.m. Didn't come home that night, so cue me panicking. Eventually get a call at 10 a.m. from a very tired husband who is finishing his paperwork. He had gone to a domestic violence call at a block from flats. As they walk through the hall to the main door, they are walking by blood-stained walls where it was clear a person had been dragged against their will. Walked in to find the wife unconscious on the floor, her upper lip torn off, and the husband sitting quite calmly with a baseball bat next to him, blood everywhere. I've posted this before. As a rookie, I was responding to an alarm at restaurant that was supposed to be haunted by a woman. The first officer that arrived was an older officer that didn't do much and didn't ever get excited on the radio. As soon as he arrived, he asked for a second unit in a high-pitched tone. As I pulled in, he had his shotgun out and he was leaned up over his hood. My first thought was, oh shit, someone is breaking in. When I ran up to him and asked what up, all he said was as he pulled up and his lights hit the building, a woman jumped off the roof and disappeared. He was clearly shook. Me and another officer checked the building and found no evidence that someone had been there. It made an impression on me and I never went back to the restaurant at night without another officer. Back when I was working patrol, my partner and I got a welfare check call for an elderly man whose out-of-state family couldn't get in contact with. These are the worst calls, because you know what is behind that door. The family gave us authorization to enter if there was no answer. And there wasn't. The front door was locked, but we were able to open the garage door and go in through that door. The garage gave us signs of what was to come inside the house. It was filled with junk from floor to ceiling, front to back, with just a little walkway to the door to the house. After taking a few steps into the garage, we knew what we would find. The smell was overwhelming. So far, there is nothing creepy or scary about this, as this wasn't my first body I found or seen. After making our way through the trash pathways in the living room and kitchen, we made our way to the master bedroom. We found him sitting in a rocking chair in his bedroom. Because decomp had already set in, there were no muscles holding him together. So his upper body was leaning to the right at an almost perfect 90 degrees. His spine had snapped post-mortem, so it was a really awkward bend. It was really creepy to see a body bent that way without having any type of trauma. He passed from natural causes. Had a call that a woman who lived alone with her dogs and had not been seen for some time. Myself and a colleague forced entry to the property and were met by the 3 dogs in an agitated state. Searched the place, and in the living room was a couch with an object sticking up from it. Despite it being daytime and visibility good, I couldn't work out what it was. It looked like an arm sticking vertically up. Walked around it a couple of times, then realized it was the spine of the partially eaten resident. Most of the midsection of the body was gone, with just a piece of skin joining the legs to the upper torso. The legs had been dragged over to the head, causing the spine to stick up out of the body. It was horrific, but we did our inquiries. The dogs were removed, as were the remains. There were no suspicious circumstances, so despite the horrific nature of it, it was treated as a sudden death. A cleaning crew was organized. We had just left when we realized that we had not found the pelvis. We didn't want the cleaning crew to find it, so went back and did another search. Still no trace of it. The dogs must have completely consumed the entire pelvis. I was military police at the time, just getting on shift, checking out my patrol car and making sure everything was good to go for the night. During shift change, most patrols are called back to turn everything in and go home while the next shift is going out. I'm standing outside my patrol car making sure my radar is calibrated when I hear the radio go off and dispatch tells us they received a call about a man with a gun walking towards the main gate. I look up at one of my partners and he is standing next to his car, and we just kind of gave each other this oh shit look. We both get into our patrol cars and haul ass to the main gate. I probably hit 80 or 90 miles per hour on the way there. I roll up to the gate and roll down my window, and I ask one of the soldiers there that check IDs where this guy is, and he just points down the road off base. Technically it was military property, even though it was outside of the gate, up until it gets to a stoplight in the nearby town, so I hightail it down the road to try and find this guy. My mindset this whole time is thinking it's an active shooter like what happened at Fort Hood, or maybe it's a terrorist attack. Not even a year earlier the FBI caught a guy trying to sneak a bomb into the base. I finally see the guy and I turn on my spotlight, and sure enough I see a reflection from his hand like my light is gleaming off of metal. I slam the brakes and put it in park and hop out, draw my pistol and start shouting at the guy, "Let me see your hands. Put them up in the air." Then I see what the reflection was from in his hand. This guy was just carrying a thermos. My partner gets there right behind me and I still have him at gunpoint. Poor guy was probably pissing himself. My partner pats him down to confirm that he did in fact have no weapons on him. Apparently someone else drove by the guy and saw the reflection of his thermos and thought it was a gun too and called it in. I had to fill out some paperwork on the guy, so I told him to sit in my passenger seat because it was cold out that night. I couldn't stop apologizing to the guy. Apparently he was convicted of a DUI, which is why he was walking in the first place, and he worked as a janitor at one of the schools on base. It's more funny than anything now, but scary for me at the time because I thought I was about to get into a gunfight. It was a night shift. I was in a back street for an emergency call that says there are some thieves trying to rob a lady's house. And there was blackout on that street. I saw no thieves, but right before out from Dark Street, a stray cat jumped on me from a trash. My whole body paralyzed for a second. Heart beats like crazy. I never been scared that much in my entire work life. Sorry for bad English. Not me but my dad. He's a road officer and about 2 years ago he was patrolling when he heard an engine revving behind him. By the time he looked up and a guy in a pickup truck has rear-ended him. He calls it in on his radio, thinking it was just an accidental something when the guy reverses and hits him again. My dad realized it was on purpose and as the guy tries to take off, my dad turns his car into the truck as it goes by. He must have hit something good because it disabled the guy's truck. My dad tries to get out but can't move his leg. So he just keeps the guy on point telling him to keep his hands up. The guy starts hitting himself in the face saying kill me, I'm going to kill you. My dad didn't see any weapon and the guy didn't get out of his car, so he just kept him in sight until backup arrived. They arrested the guy and took my dad to the hospital. When I got to my dad he told me that he was afraid because he couldn't feel or move his leg. He was worried he was never going to walk again. Lucky there was no serious damage and after some physical therapy he was able to get most of the feeling back and can walk. They later interviewed the guy and he said he had no regrets. He wanted to die and thought he would go out death by cop. He even said something along the lines of killing my dad in the crash to make the other officers angry. So yeah, that's our scariest story. My dad is a police officer, and he has plenty of stories but doesn't tell me the scariest. The only creepy story he has ever told me is only peripherally related to his work. To be clear, my dad does not believe in the supernatural/paranormal. I wasn't allowed to watch ghost hunting shows as a kid and if I tried to talk about paranormal stuff, he'd shut me down fast. So anyway, there is this house in my hometown where apparently there was a brutal murder back in the 80s. My dad's friend was looking at buying it, and my dad went with him to walk through it. I don't remember the relationship to my dad's friend but another woman was invited to come along. My dad said that she came in, stopped, and was just horrified. She just kept saying something awful happened here. We should leave. My dad asked his friend if he or she knew about the murder that took place there. His friend had a vague recollection of the case, but didn't know it took place in that house. He doubted the woman would know because she wasn't from the area. To this day, that's the only time my dad has ever acknowledged something like this. He deals with enough real horror, so I guess he doesn't want to entertain the possibility of anything else that's scary. Not a cop was on a ride along with my dad. It was several years ago, during a full moon. Crazy shit legit happens on a full moon. He gets a call that a mother needs help to get her ex-husband out of her house. The ex-husband never got convicted for it but he was charged with sexual assault with a minor twice. They couldn't convict for some reason, don't remember why, but he was prohibited from seeing his ex-wife's kids. To clear the confusion, this was before the following incident. So he arrives on site and I'm following him, because we think this is just a drunk dude that's being aggressive who needs to be removed, get inside the house and go to the child's bedroom where he was, only to find him balls deep in a little girl, a dead little girl. He was still moving in and out, making noises which horrify me to this day. Her head was completely twisted around so that she was looking behind her. It was so surreal and creepy, my legs gave out when I got outside. Dad got him off of her and subdued him. I was outside when I heard the mother find out what happened, another noise which will haunt me for life. I was patrolling one dark wet night when we got a call out to a bridge in the middle of nowhere about a body hanging under the bridge. We got to the destination and it was a woman who had hung herself up fairly high. We had to wait for all the other usual EMTs to arrive, so we are just standing there and we hear a faint noise coming from the body and it gets louder like a baby deer being born. Just as I shone my torch at the hanging body, something slips from under her dress and splats on the ground with a faint cry and a gurgle. We just stare at it stunned when seconds later another blob slips out of the body and hits the other blob. We realize that the blobs are babies and on closer inspection they both would have died from the fall if they weren't dead in utero. Their heads were cracked open like watermelons, but just as I got closer I could hear the last breath of the second baby slip out of its body, like it had been holding its breath for a long time and was now ready to give up the battle of its very short life. I was part of a SWAT team and we got lots of calls that were disturbing, scary and creepy, but this tops it. My team received a call where shots had been heard inside a house. The caller said that their neighbor's daughter had come to their door covered in blood and shouting had been heard before the shots. We pulled up, grabbed our rifles and put our helmets on. There was a child covered in blood and 2 people stood holding her. As we headed into the apartment block, we evacuated the floor that the call was made from. Other floors had been actuated already. We made it to the door where the shots were heard from. We knock on the door, shout in. No reply. So we breach. The first sight was blood on the floor, well, blood everywhere. We walk into the other half of the living room where there is a body on the sofa. Half of us takes the left side and me and a few others take the right. We knock on the bathroom door that was closed. We expected to be shot through the door. No reply again. I slowly open the door and we get met with more blood and a body in the shower. Blood was found on the child's bed as well. What had happened is the child's mother and father were arguing. The father grabbed his gun and shot the mother in the head. Remember I said the girl had blood over her? It turned out she had been shot in the head as well. The coroners believed it was so she didn't say anything to the police. But the bullet didn't go through the skull. The father had then gone to the bathroom, closed the door and shot himself in the shower.